Should be, yeah. Good morning. Okay. So on page 51. So now that he explained that there are two reasons for the amuna, for the natural amuna, and these are not just two reasons, but it means two levels of depth where the amuna comes from. One is it comes from the fact that the neshama l'mayla sees godliness, which means the source of the soul, the deeper part of the soul, the part of the neshama that doesn't change, sees godliness. And as a result of that, it has the absolute certainty about Hashem. And that certainty is projected into the part of the neshama that we're conscious of. And the second level is the deeper level, that it's not as a result only of what the neshama sees, but because the neshama's essence is one with the essence of Hashem. And therefore, you don't even need the neshama to experience this seeing, the vision. Just the essence of the soul is one with Hashem, and that's where this amuna comes from. Now he's going to talk a little bit about the difference. So page 50, 51. Winyan hu zesh amuna di Yisrael ibaif and shumesh nafshel zem. The fact that the amuna by Yidden is in a way that a person's ready to give up his life. Hu beikir ba'amuna shemitzad etzem haneshama. So we mentioned this briefly yesterday. There's one thing where people have amuna naturally, in spite of the fact that there are a lot of things happening in the world that are questionable. We don't understand why we see wicked people having it so good. We don't understand why we see good people, unfortunately, suffering. We don't understand why we see wicked people being successful. And sometimes the good people, we watch how they fail in their endeavors, which are good endeavors. So it questions, it challenges our faith. And all sorts of things. There are people who say, well, I don't see anything. Well, what's the proof that Hashem exists? So for this, the other level of amunah suffices. But when a person's amunah is so strong, to the point that they're ready to give up their life, Hashem, that comes mainly from the deeper level of amunah, that I and Hashem are in essence one. And he explains why. The amunah mitzadzeh shehuraya, this amunah, that's a result of the fact that the neshama sees godliness, mazlayu chazeh, his mazel sees godliness, hagam shebetek of gadol, even though seeing is very powerful, kidu, as it's known, this amtus shemitzad riyah, it's known that when something is sort of validated because of vision, that I see it, is Samtus Gdela B'Yoser. This is the biggest, the strongest level of where a person could feel sure and certain about something. This is a point that the Rebbe mentions a lot, and the classical example for this is there's a halacha that Ein Eid Nasadayin, which means I think it's mainly in issues that are where the judges in a bezdin have to judge someone in a matter of life and the opposite. In other words, is he going to get the death sentence or not? The halachas, they are very detailed and very very specific. There are a lot of conditions, a lot of criteria regarding the people who are judging, the conditions that they're judging, the way they judge. So one of them is that if the bezdin, one of the witnesses is actually one of the rabbis who are judging the person. He himself saw the way this person went and killed somebody. Could he be a judge or not? What?
No.
I would think, of course he could be a judge. If people who never saw it can judge, so why can't someone who actually saw the act happen, why can't he judge? So you're right, the halach is that he can be a judge. Question is why?
Because maybe he will see this person like always as guilty, like because he saw like the
What's
maybe
wrong with that? He actually saw that he's guilty. What's wrong with that? You're right, but what's wrong with that?
he wouldn't find like, I don't know, he wouldn't see like both perspective. Like he will only see the bad that he did.
You're right again. So what's wrong with that?
I don't know.
So you're right. There's a pasuk in the Chumash where it says "Vitzilu ha'eda," which means that the bezdin has to entertain both possibilities, both options. The person could be guilty, the person could be innocent, and then they have to debate the issue, and all the different rabbis will make their decision, and you judge by the majority decisions. Being that it says "Vitzilu ha'eda," these are the words, and they will also make an attempt to consider him innocent, the Gemara says, therefore, there has to be the possibility for everyone who's judging to also think of him as innocent. Someone who actually witnessed it with his own eyes can't think of him as innocent. He can't find any way of thinking him as innocent. By the way, when I say innocent, it doesn't mean it didn't happen. It doesn't mean that he's finding an excuse. Well, when he was younger, he went through a trauma. I'm talking about innocent, that he didn't do the act. If I saw it with my own eyes. So the question is this: what if I didn't see it, but Moshe Rabbeinu is the witness? He comes to the bezdin, and Moshe Rabbeinu himself comes to the bezdin and says, "I'm testifying that I saw this person do this and this." Could you trust Moshe Rabbeinu? The trust of Moshe Rabbeinu is 100,000 million billion gazillion %. And yet I'd be allowed to be the judge. Why? Because when you hear something, no matter how certain you are, there's still some room, some potential that a doubt could come to my head. I can question it. When you see something, that's absolute certainty. There's nothing that can raise a question. And that's what the Rebbe is saying, that it's known that the certainty or the validity something has in terms of I'm sure that it happened because I saw it with my own eyes. That's something that can't be challenged. Seeing that I hear, no matter how certain it is and what the source is, but being that I didn't see it with my own eyes, there's always room that something could come in and create a little space of a doubt. So therefore, even though the neshama up there sees godliness. If it sees godliness, then the certainty is absolute. Nevertheless, being the emunah is a result of a cause, in other words, it's something external that the neshama sees godliness, and it's not connected to the essence of the soul. It's because the soul saw. If the soul wouldn't have seen, it won't necessarily have that emunah. So the emunah that comes as a result of seeing, there's Therefore, it's not entirely impossible and not entirely out of the question that the person shouldn't give up his life. In other words, it could be something when it comes to giving up his life, all sorts of thoughts would come to his head, all sorts of logic would come to his head, and explanations and justifications that he shouldn't give up his life. So, yes, the Amunah will help me when I have the ordinary challenges, questions, intellectual questions, issues, things that happen, painful issues. But when it comes to giving up a person's life, which is the highest form of letting go of myself, if the certainty would come because of vision, there's room that it might not happen. The fact that the Amunah is strong enough, even to the extent of Mesa Nafsha, to give up the person's life for Hashem, that's because this Amunah comes from the Etzem, from the essence. And the essence is something which is inseparable. Like I told you yesterday, that when two things are separate but connected, then something can get in between and separate them again, because in essence, they're separate. But I can't separate myself from myself. I am who I am. And therefore, no matter how strong the connection is, if it's not one essence, it is potential for separation. So if the strongest test comes up where a person is in a situation where it's either giving up their life or their connection to Hashem and their Amunah, they might lose it. So the fact that a Yid has Amunah in ordinary circumstances, that comes from the fact that the Neshama sees. The fact that a Yid has Amunah to the extent where they're ready to give up their life for Hashem, that must come from a deeper place, that comes from the essence. So in other words, what we're saying now, both are true. But in normal circumstances, I don't have to sort of access that deeper part of my Amunah. And when there is a situation like Mesiras Nefesh, a person's being demanded to give up his life, at that time, what does this trigger? This triggers the Amunah that comes from the essence of the soul, which is one essence with Hashem. And we explained this in a previous Maimah, but I'm just going to repeat it again. And that is that we always say that to have Amunah is something which is beyond logic. I mean, to have Amunah, to give up your life especially. The reason for that is because logic is the part of the person, is the deepest and the highest thing within me. My intellect, my seichel, the way I understand, that's me, that's my perspective, that's who I am, that's what I'm all about. And therefore, its main sort of objective and deepest objective is my own personal survival, just to exist, to thrive, of course, but just to exist. That's the strongest desire in a human being. And therefore, the person's brain will produce all sorts of ways of explaining and justification and reasons why I should not give up my existence. And it'll make sense to me at the time. We once spoke about it, that when you're sitting in a classroom and learning about Mesiras Nefesh, it sounds like, oh, that's the right thing to do. But when Chas v'Shalom, it's real, and the person standing in front of someone that wants to take away his life, and it's happening, the brain will work on a different wavelength, and all sorts of reasons and logic would come to the person's mind why spiritually, even from Hashem's perspective, it'll be better that he doesn't give up his life, he continues to live, he'll be able to take care of his family, he'll be able to raise his children, he'll be able to do this, that, all sorts of reasons will come to his head. So the fact that Yidden didn't go that route and most Yidden gave up their lives means that something was triggered that transcends logic and it took over. It was higher than logic, deeper than logic, and reason wasn't sort of effective at that moment. And therefore they gave up their life. Because they would stop and think and approach it logically. Logic would not lead to the conclusion, give up your existence. Logic will always find a way to explain how I should sustain my existence, not give it up. Now, every form of submission to Hashem is a little bit of giving up. I give up my pleasure. I give up my comfort. I give up my goals. I give up career. I give up money. It's always a form of Mesiras Nefesh. But this is the ultimate Mesiras Nefesh, where the person is literally giving up his life. Okay. Now we can explain also what it says in the Maimer. We said before that Moshe is not only a faithful shepherd, but that he shepherds us with faith. He feeds us faith. This also applies to all the shepherds and faithful shepherds of all the generations. That just like Moshe Rabbeinu strengthened the emunah of the Yidden in his generation, so too all the tzaddikim in the other generations, which are an extension of Moshe Rabbeinu, they also strengthen the emunah of Yidden, sheyamdu b'mesiras nefesh b'mekiyim Torah mitzvos, that they should stand strong and have mesiras nefesh for Torah mitzvos. And here the Rebbe is going to raise a question that on the surface it appears that Moshe Rabbeinu, what he does for us is different than what other leaders did for us in the times of Golus. Let me ask a question. In the times of Moshe Rabbeinu, was there anybody that was threatening the Jews that if you don't give up Yiddishkeit, you'll have to give up your life? No. They went out of Mitzrayim. They were constantly under Moshe Rabbeinu's protection. Amalek attacked them and they were wiped out. And basically the clouds were destroying anything that got in their way. They used to have miracles upon miracles all along. So there was never a situation where they had to have Mesiras Nefesh. So what does it mean Moshe Rabbeinu gave them emunah in the desert? We said before that without Moshe Rabbeinu, the emunah is makif. It's somewhat external. It's not internalized. And through Moshe Rabbeinu, it becomes internalized. How does it become internalized? So it's explained in Tanya, chapter 42. I think I wanted to put it into the booklet, but I'm not sure that I actually did. Let me see. Probably not. Chapter 42 in Tanya is the famous chapter where the Alter Rebbe explains this point, that Moshe Rabbeinu, according to Kabbalah, it says Moshe Rabbeinu is Das, the sphere of Das, and he gives us the sphere of Das. What does that mean? Das is the opposite, not Amunah. Das is knowledge in Hashem. So yes, but the difference between Chochmah, Bina, and Das is that Chochmah and Bina is understanding, comprehension. Das is more than just comprehension. Das is the ability to feel the concept. When I learn about Hashem, Das is that it should be able to penetrate, and I feel it to the point that it has an impact on my life. So Das is always considered the bridge between the intellect and the emotion, because we can understand things very deeply. Academically, it all makes sense. I can understand the greatness of Hashem. I can understand how fascinating Hashgacha process is. I can understand how amazing the creation is. Yesh Mi'ayin, wow, that's amazing. But it might not have any impact on my life because it's distant from me. When you talk about Gashmias, we all feel. If a person discovers that in this room or this opportunity, I can make $100,000, I get excited. I don't have to meditate. It happens naturally. If a person sees food that they enjoy, they also don't have to meditate. It happens naturally that you're attracted to it, or any other physical pleasure, because we're naturally connected to physicality, because we're physical. So when we see something that's physically pleasurable, we're attracted to it automatically, naturally. When we think about Hashem, even though we understand it, but Hashem is distant from us. It's a different reality. It's spiritual. It's abstract. So we need the das, that it should really penetrate. I should feel the greatness of Hashem. I should feel whatever it is that I'm thinking about. And when I feel it, that's when it really becomes part of me, and that's when it has an impact on the way I live my life. And who does that? Moshe Rabbeinu. That's his function, that he feeds us with das. And when we have the das, then it's pnimius, because it means I'm not having amunah because someone else is inspiring me. I understand it, and I got it, and it got me. There was a story of a chassid that he was davening. He said Shema Yisrael, and after he finished saying Shema Yisrael, he fainted. So I don't know if he said it or someone said it about him, that when he said Shema Yisrael and he said the words Hashem Echad, he felt it to the bone of his skull of his head. So he fainted. In other words, he felt it in the most tangible way he can possibly feel something. And when he felt the greatness and the awesomeness of Hashem Echad, he fainted. It was too overwhelming for him. The fact that we don't faint is because we know about it, but it's up there. So what's the question? The question is, it seems to be that what Moshe Rabbeinu does and what the Moshe Rabbeinu of the future generations did were a little bit different. They're the ones who get us to have Mesiras Nefesh. And Moshe Rabbeinu, what he does is get us to have das, get us to have that understanding of Hashem to the point where I can feel it. So even though the both are about Amunah, but they're a little bit different. So that explains, no, it's really all the same. Let's look at the question. No, wait a second, where am I? Yeah. Again, the bottom of page 51 is raising a question. It would seem, the last paragraph, that Moshe Rabbeinu feeds us with Amunah by being mashpia to Yidden das, in godliness. Through having das, the Amunah penetrates the pnimius. But what we just finished saying, that the faithful shepherds of all the generations strengthen our Amunah, they're the ones who give us the ability to have Mesiras Nefesh. So it's a little bit different than Moshe Rabbeinu. And we just finished saying that they do the same thing as Moshe Rabbeinu. So this is the answer. Based on what we said before, Iker ha'inyan d'raya mehemna, the main function of the faithful shepherd in all generations, shuzon mufanis is hamuna atzma, that he feeds us with this hamuna. She'hamuna tiyalei rak mashim mitzad giluyim, mitzad etzem, that the hamuna should be not only because the neshama sees godliness and the neshama experiences godliness, but something deeper than that, because the neshama's essence is one essence with Hashem. So the fact that Moshe Rabbeinu makes the Amunah become internalized through having das is not a separate thing. That's a toitzah, that's a sort of a natural result of the fact that he feeds us with the essence of the Amunah. In other words, when I become conscious of the fact that the essence of my neshama is one with the essence of Hashem, that's what helps me have the Amunah b'pnimi, is that I feel the Amunah in Hashem, not only know it in a way that is distant from me, but it's part of me. So the truth is really both Moshe Rabbeinu and all the leaders of the generation do the same thing. They're there to bring the Amunah in a very deep, penetrate very deeply, and I should feel it in a very real way. The only difference is in times that Moshe Rabbeinu didn't need Mesiras Nefesh, so it affected us in the way that when I meditate on Hashem's greatness, I feel it. And the other tzaddikim, because they lived in the time of Golus, and we needed Mesiras Nefesh, so by them, it came out in the way of Mesiras Nefesh. So again, let me just repeat this. Let me summarize what I just said. Moshe Rabbeinu and all the faithful shepherds of all generations, in essence, do the same thing. They bring us Amunah by allowing us to be in touch with the fact that our essence is one essence with Hashem. But the difference is, in Moshe Rabbeinu's times, how did it manifest? By understanding godliness. In the other generations, how did it manifest? By giving up our lives for Hashem. But based on this, we see something very interesting, and that is that according to this, the faithful shepherds in the later generations, in a way, they revealed more about the essence than Moshe Rabbeinu himself. That's the next piece. The fact that in the later generations, when Yidden needed to give up their lives for Hashem, the faithful shepherds of the generations gave them the strength to have emunah so strong to the point of giving up their lives. That means that they, in their times, they revealed the true essence of what it means to be a faithful shepherd, even more than Moshe Rabbeinu. In other words, in Moshe Rabbeinu's times, it didn't fully reveal that the emunah comes because of the essence, because there was no Mesiras Nefesh. So even though it is because of that, but it wasn't so much felt. In the later generations, where it led to Mesiras Nefesh, when you see a person giving up his life, that means that this reveals openly that the emunah comes not just because the neshama sees, but the neshama is. Are we getting too complicated so early in the morning, or you're following me? Hope you had your coffee ready. I sense that it's not 100% clear. What?
Just like reflecting in two different ways. Moshe Rabbeinu understanding godliness and feeling godliness, and other generations like overcoming and
Mesiras Nefesh. Right. So the difference is just how it manifests. But the difference is when it manifests by understanding godliness, it doesn't really indicate that it's coming from that deep place. When it manifests in a way, Mesiras Nefesh, that reveals that it's coming from the essence of the neshama. And so he's saying that the later generations and the faithful shepherds of the other generations, they revealed the essence part more than Moshe Rabbeinu himself, because in his times it wasn't necessary. So the source of the emunah is from the same place. The only difference is, by Moshe Rabbeinu it manifested one way, and by the faithful shepherds manifested in another way.
What does that mean?
What does it mean?
Yeah.
It means that Moshe Rabbeinu manifested in the way that they were able to internalize their emunah and really understand it and feel it. And that doesn't yet prove, that doesn't show that it's coming from the essence. That could be a result of the fact that the neshama sees godliness. Because when you see something, you really, truly feel it. What is the difference, even begashmius? Sometimes you hear about something, but you didn't see, you just heard about it. And then you actually see it, and the effect on you is so much greater, both in the positive or the negative. Like someone told me that her father was sick, and it was a serious illness, and unfortunately, as she heard about it, she lived out of town, and they kept keeping in touch with her, what's going on, what's happening, and then she came in to visit. And she walked into the hospital, and she saw her father in a hospital bed and just broke down. Nothing new happened. She knew all the information before. But everything she knew, now it was visual, has a whole different impact. That's das. And the same thing is the positive. Imagine someone will tell you the Niagara Falls, it's awesome. And they tell you what it looks like. It's huge, water coming down. No matter how much they explain it to you, when you go there and you actually see it, it has a different impact on you. When you go and you see the Grand Canyon, it has a different impact on you. Why? Because you're seeing it. So because the neshama sees godliness, it's bepnimius, that it really touches us in a way that's pnimius, that's internalized. And that's enough. But when we have Mesiras Nefesh, that expresses something deeper. This must mean that the Neshama's essence and Hashem's essence are one. Okay. Page 54, 55. I'll tell you what to do. You want to understand it better. When you get back to the dorm, explain it to someone else. When you explain it to them, either you realize that you don't understand it, or you'll understand it even better. It's my humble suggestion. V'hinei, Yadua, it's known, Shamasiris, Navish Bepel, Al Teira Mitzvah, Shal Kol Yisrael, Hoysa Bepurim, Bizman Gzeres Haman. When was there ever a time that all the Yidden, not just a city, a village, a community, even a country, Yidden had Mesiras Nefesh, but that all Yidden had Mesiras Nefesh for Torah mitzvahs? That was only in Purim. In fact, let's compare it even to Hanukkah. A Mesiras Nefesh, the Hanukkah, in the times where there was Gzeres Yavan, the time where the Syrian Greeks persecuted the Yidden, that Mesiras Nefesh was mainly Matasyahu and his children. They were the ones who went out there, and they're the ones who fought, and they put their life on the line. But the Mesiras Nefesh time of Haman was all the Yidden. It says in the Medrash, that Mordechai HaTzadik, in his generation, his greatness was equal to Moshe Rabbeinu in his generation. Why does it specify Mordechai? In every generation, there's somebody who is the faithful shepherd of the generation, not just Mordechai. So why does the Gemara spell out that Mordechai, he was like Moshe? There has to be someone like that in every generation. So the answer is, Shamayel is the Mordechai HaYehudi who shoya harayim mehem the begilu shel kol Yisrael b'deirei. The common factor between Mordechai and Moshe, in Moshe Rabbeinu's times, everyone knew that he's the faithful shepherd of the whole generation. And the times of Mordechai's times, also everybody knew that he was the faithful shepherd of the generation. In many other generations, there's always a faithful shepherd, but it's not so openly seen. Let's say Rashi, he was the biggest tzaddik in his generation. There were a lot of tzaddikim. Not everybody recognized that he was that, or Rambam in his generation, or the Arizal in his generation. And the same in every generation, not everybody recognized, or you didn't see openly the impact that he had on all Jews in the generation. And the same is in the time of Hanukkah. I guess Yehuda HaMaccabee, maybe he was the greatest person of the generation. But we see the Mesiras Nefesh was mainly by him and his family. He didn't affect all the Jews to have that Mesiras Nefesh. So he didn't openly see how they all draw Mesiras Nefesh from him. In the times of Mordechai and Purim, all the Yidden had that. The Dugas Moshe Rabbeinu. So this is the similarity. This is where it resembles Moshe Rabbeinu, that he also, in his generation, it wasn't Mesiras Nefesh, but he gave them das, the knowledge of Hashem. In fact, Moshe Rabbeinu's generation, the whole generation is called Der Deya. That's an expression that's found in Gemara and Medrash. Der Deya means a generation with knowledge, because Moshe Rabbeinu was the source of das, and he provided his whole generation with das. So even though Moshe was openly the faithful shepherd of the whole generation, and Mordechai was openly the faithful generation of his generation, faithful shepherd, but the difference was only that Moshe provided them with das, and Mordechai provided them with Mesiras Nefesh. So both of them provided them with Amunah, but in Moshe Rabbeinu's case, the Amunah manifested in having das, and by Mordechai, it manifested in Mesiras Nefesh. That's the bracket. Ela sheba Moshe yegili inyan zeh l'chol Yisrael de shehimshech das l'chol anshe derei, u'b'Mordechai yegili inyan zeh adei shegila kech Mesiras Nefesh l'chol anshe derei. He revealed everybody's das, the Amunah, because they had the absolute solid Amunah, therefore they were able to allow the knowledge of Hashem register in a real deep, real way. And by Mordechai, it brought us to Mesiras Nefesh. Now the Rebbe is going to add something, which is a very interesting point, and it's very common in the Rebbe's Sichos. I need a little introduction to explain it. There's a Mishnah that says a person should always remember and be aware there's going to come a time that he's going to have to give a din v'cheshbon. Din means a judgment, v'cheshbon means an account. So the Baal Shem Tov asks, shouldn't the order be reversed? When you go to a court and they're judging you, what comes first? The judgment or the account? The account comes first. They put the right things on the right side of the scale, the negative things on the left side of the scale, and they're weighing one against the other, the good and the bad, and then they make a judgment. Why does it say in the order, din v'cheshbon, first judgment and then an accounting? That's number one. And there's a similar Mishnah with another question. But no, we'll go to that after we do this. So the Baal Shem Tov says a very powerful thing. He says that Hashem would never punish a person for anything that they did unless they themselves would give the ruling that I deserve the punishment. Which person's ever going to do something like that? Who's going to rule that they deserve a punishment? So what does Hashem do? He arranges that someone else does something similar to what I did. And then I say, that person, they deserve such and such because of what they did. Then Hashem says, so you just yourself judged that for doing that, you deserve so and so. So now we'll make the comparison. You also did something similar. So basically, you judge yourself that you deserve this and this. Therefore, the Baal Shem Tov said we should be extremely careful never to bring judgment out of our mouth against another person. Based on that, we understand the order. First comes the judgment. Then Hashem makes the accounting and says, okay, what you did is similar to what he did. And you just said that for doing that, you deserve this punishment. So you basically gave a ruling on yourself that you deserve this punishment. What? David HaMelech, right. Right. So there's a story in Navi which is similar to that, which is this point. So Baal Shem Tov says this explains another Mishnah where it says a person is sometimes punished with his knowledge or without his knowledge. I mean, what does it mean without his knowledge? It means I don't mean to judge myself. I mean to judge them. But Hashem says if you're judging them that they deserve this punishment because of such and such, you're really judging yourself. That's one thing. Then the Rebbe says that everything which we find in the negative should surely be in the positive. Usually the positive is even stronger than the negative. So therefore, it also works in the positive. If I say, wow, this person's amazing for what they did, they deserve this amazing reward. So by doing that, Hashem says, okay, so you also deserve that reward because you did something like that too. However, the Rebbe relates it to something else. And it says we find very often in the Sichos that the Frierdiker Rebbe or the Rebbe Rashab or another Rebbe says the Alter Rebbe had this and this quality. They didn't say it about themselves. They said about the Alter Rebbe. And the Rebbe would always conclude that if they said it about the Alter Rebbe, indirectly they ruled on themselves that they have that same quality as well. Just to give an example, it's very well known in the Sichos that the Alter Rebbe's neshama was very unique. Anyone read this? What was unique about the Alter Rebbe's neshama? A new neshama. I remember always wondering, is that only the Alter Rebbe or the other Rebbes as well? And I remember there's a Sikh where the Rebbe said it was the Alter Rebbe and all the Rebbes also. In other words, once it was ruled that the Alter Rebbe had that neshama, then by definition, the Rebbe was saying that about himself, each Rebbe when he spoke. That's what the Rebbe says, yeah. I had a question about it. Someone sent me recently the recording. You hear the Rebbe actually saying it. Yeah. So the same with other things. And that's what the Rebbe is saying here. Yeshleimar, that the Friedrich Rebbe writes in the Maimer, that Mordechai in his generation was like Moshe. Through this, he sort of ruled on himself that in his times, he was openly the faithful shepherd of his generation. Because that was a generation where there was unfortunately tremendous decrees against Yiddishkeit, where the millions of Jews who lived in Russia weren't allowed to learn Torah and do mitzvahs. And he was the one that strengthens everybody's Hamunah. So therefore, of course, the Rebbe is saying that we know that each generation is a faithful shepherd. So in that generation, the Friedrich Rebbe's leadership was similar to Moshe Rabbeinu, that it had an impact on the whole generation in an open way, not just in a hidden way.
How does that apply nowadays that we didn't have like any like external forces that are like making us live our life?
Right. So Baruch Hashem, we don't have that. But like I said, we have Mesiras Nefesh in a subtle way. Our Mesiras Nefesh is giving up our pleasure, is giving up covet. And it's not so simple, as you see, that so many people don't want to give up, not money, not honor, not their position, not their prestige, and they fight and they cause so much problems in the world. So obviously giving that up is definitely also a form of Mesiras Nefesh. Yeah, Baruch Hashem. But there's an expression Chassidus, Mesiras Haratzon is Mesiras Nefesh. Giving up my desire, that's Mesiras Nefesh. So of course the Jews in Russia who actually had Mesiras Nefesh physically, I think I once told you, when we were growing up, there were a lot of older Russian Jews who were in jail and went through all the hardships. So they would refer to us as Amerikaner chokoladnikas, which means Americans who were raised on chocolate bars. Like you guys, your life, what kind of life did you guys have? Chocolate bars. And then when on Yontif, we'd all go for a walk to other neighborhoods to give over the Rebbe's sichos. And very often, almost all the time, whenever we had to go on that walk, it would be raining. Sometimes it would be really heavy rain, sometimes. So they would laugh and say, now we're going to see the American Mesiras Nefesh. They're going to go walk in the rain. You know, their Mesiras Nefesh just sat in the jail for 10 years, and they were going to walk in the rain. So every, Baruch Hashem, we don't want the other kind, but in every generation, it's in proportion to where we're at. For us, this is Mesiras Nefesh, to give up our chocolate bars. Okay, to be continued.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Very welcome.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Very welcome. Have a great day and a good Shabbos.
Good job.
Shabbos.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. What is
Okay. Yeah. It's a very deep one. It gets deeper as we go along. It might be a part I'll have to stop. Yes. What did we get?